Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the ancient world, back to a time when the very ground beneath your feet felt less solid, more like a cosmic experiment in progress. Imagine, if you will, sinking into your favorite spot, the soft glow of a bedside lamp painting shadows on the wall, as we journey to a world where mountains were born from divine tantrums and seas swelled with the moods of gods. You're probably picturing glistening marble temples and toga-clad figures, but let's be real. You probably won't survive this journey without at least a mild case of historical drowsiness. That's the goal, after all. You're drifting now, aren't you? The air around you, usually filled with the hum of modern life, begins to thin, replaced by a stillness, an ancient quiet that whispers of beginnings. Forget the blare of traffic or the insistent ping of your phone. Here, there's only the gentle creak of primordial trees and the distant rush of waters that haven't yet learned their place. You feel a subtle shift, a softening of the edges of your perception, as if the very concept of time is stretching, becoming elastic. You're not just listening to a story, you're dissolving into it, becoming a silent observer in the dawn of creation. The stars above haven't quite settled into their familiar constellations. They flicker with a raw, untamed energy, like sparks from a cosmic forge. Below, the land is a vast, unformed canvas, waiting for its first brushstrokes. You sense the immense potential, the chaotic energy bubbling just beneath the surface, preparing for the grand spectacle of existence. It's a time before calendars, before clocks, before the very idea of a day or night had any real meaning beyond the slow, ponderous rotation of something vast and unseeing. The air itself feels heavy, pregnant with the promise of worlds, of beings, of myths yet untold. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always cool to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're there, standing on the cusp of nothingness, or rather, on the cusp of everything. Before the familiar pantheon of Zeus and his squabbling siblings, before the heroes and monsters, even before the concept of Greece itself, there was just chaos. Not the kind of chaos that means your sock drawer is a mess, but a profound, absolute void, a gaping maw from which all things would eventually emerge. Think of it as the ultimate blank slate, an infinite canvas waiting for its first splash of color. This wasn't a peaceful void, mind you. It was a swirling, shapeless abyss, a primordial soup of potential. It's a tricky concept to grasp because our brains are wired for order, for cause and effect. But imagine an absence so complete that even the idea of absence hasn't quite formed yet. Historians still argue whether chaos was a state of being or a being itself, a question that probably kept ancient philosophers up at night, unlike you who should be drifting off soon. From this great, yawning chasm, the first entities began to stir. Gaia, the earth, emerged, solid and grounding, providing the very foundation for everything that would follow. She was the steady presence in the swirling nothingness, the first landmass in a watery, formless expanse. You can almost feel her ancient, enduring strength beneath your bare feet, a comforting weight in the vast emptiness. Then came Tartarus, the deep, dark abyss beneath the earth, a shadowy realm of punishment and despair that would later become synonymous with the underworld. And finally, Eros, not the cute cherub with the bow and arrow we think of today, but a primal force of desire and procreation, the very essence of attraction that would compel these nascent entities to do something, to create. Without Eros, you see, nothing would have ever gotten started. It's the original cosmic spark, the ultimate get-things-done energy. You could say he was the universe's first project manager, if you're into that kind of modern anachronism. So you have chaos, the void, Gaia, the earth, Tartarus, the abyss, and Eros, the urge to create. These are the primordial deities, the very first foundational pieces of the universe. They didn't have temples or altars. They were the environment. They existed simply because they were. There's a mainstream historical fact for you. The concept of chaos as the initial state of the universe is a recurring motif across many ancient cosmogonies, not just Greek, showing a fundamental human need to explain the unexplainable beginnings. It's comforting, isn't it, to think that even in the utter void, there was a drive towards creation? Now Gaia, the steadfast earth, wasn't content to be alone. From herself, she spontaneously birthed Uranus, the starry sky, and Pontus, the barren sea. Imagine that, just poof, a sky and a sea, perfectly formed and ready to stretch across her vast expanse. Uranus arched above her, a vast dome of shimmering stars, embracing her in a perpetual cosmic hug. Pontus, the sea, would lap at her shores, a restless, ever-changing mirror. This spontaneous generation is a quirky tidbit you don't often hear about. Usually, there's a bit more process involved, but Gaia was apparently in a hurry to get things moving. You can almost feel the fresh, crisp, untouched air of this newborn world, a world where the very elements are still finding their voice, their rhythm. The gentle lapping of Pontus against Gaia's shores creates the very first lullaby, a sound that has echoed through the millennia. Even now, if you listen closely enough, as Gaia and Uranus united, the first generation of true divine beings was born, the Titans. These weren't your everyday gods with charming quirks and family squabbles. No, the Titans were immense, powerful, primal forces of nature personified. Think of them as the original heavyweights, the OGs of the divine world. There were 12 of them initially, 6 sons and 6 daughters. Oceanus, the boundless river that encircled the world. Hyperion, the sun god, who would lend his light to the heavens. Ceus and Crius, representing intellect and constellations respectively. Iapetus, associated with mortality and violence. And the youngest, Cronus, who would become a key player in the unfolding drama. Among the daughters were Thea, goddess of sight and shining light. Rhea, mother of the Olympian gods. Themis, goddess of divine law and order. Mnemosyne, personification of memory. Phoebe, goddess of bright intellect. And Tethys, goddess of fresh water. These titans were powerful, but their father, Uranus, was difficult. He harbored a deep resentment towards his children, fearing their immense power. In a move that would set a rather unpleasant precedent for divine parenting, Uranus began to imprison his offspring in the depths of Tartarus, Gaia's dark womb. You can almost hear Gaia's anguished cries echoing through the nascent cosmos, a mother's sorrow reverberating through the very fabric of existence. She felt the immense pain of her children being cast into the darkness, a pain that would fuel her desire for vengeance. Imagine being a divine, all-powerful being, and your dad just keeps shoving your siblings into a literal pit of despair. Not exactly a hallmark moment, is it? This act of tyrannical suppression by Uranus marks the end of the very first, almost abstract stage of creation. The pure, unadulterated chaos has given way to something more structured, but also more fraught with conflict. The stage is set for the inevitable clash between generations, a pattern that, as you'll soon discover, repeats itself quite a lot in Greek mythology. This initial act of cosmic violence is a stark reminder that even at the very dawn of time, power struggles were already very much a thing. And as you feel the gentle tug of sleep beginning to claim you, remember this quiet, unsettling beginning. The stage has been built, the first players introduced, and the seeds of rebellion sown. You're still there, aren't you? Drifting in that ancient pre-mythological haze, feeling the nascent tremors of a universe still finding its footing. The quiet hum that surrounds you now is the distant echo of a cosmic struggle, a sound that promises change. You just witnessed Uranus, the sky, doing his tyrannical best to stuff his children, the Titans, back into the dark confines of Gaia, the Earth. Not exactly winning any Father of the Year awards, that guy. And Gaia? Well, she was understandably fed up. A mother's fury, even a primordial one, is a force to be reckoned with. So, Gaia, in her infinite, earthy wisdom and simmering resentment, began to plot. You can almost feel her deep, rumbling anger, a tectonic shift of emotion beneath your ethereal feet. She fashioned a great, jagged sickle from the very flint within her body, an instrument of cosmic rebellion. Think of it as the ultimate DIY revenge tool, crafted from pure, unadulterated motherly frustration. She then appealed to her imprisoned children, the mighty Titans, urging them to rise against their oppressive father. It was a risky proposition, a call to revolution against the very entity that stretched endlessly above them. Most of the Titans, perhaps intimidated by Uranus's power or simply accustomed to their dark confinement, hesitated. They were primal forces, yes, but not necessarily known for their daring individualism. But not Cronus. Cronus, the youngest and, arguably, the most ambitious of Gaia's sons. He was a titan of time, and perhaps he understood better than his siblings that all things, even tyrannical reigns, must come to an end. Or maybe he was just incredibly impatient. You sense his burgeoning ambition, a cold, calculating resolve that belied his youthful status among his powerful siblings. He saw an opportunity, a path to power, and he seized it. This is a mainstream historical fact. The castration of Uranus by Cronus is a foundational myth, explaining the separation of earth and sky and the very genesis of the sea foam from which Aphrodite would later emerge. It's a rather gruesome origin story for a goddess of love, isn't it? Under Gaia's direction, Cronus lay in wait. When Uranus descended to mate with Gaia, Cronus, armed with that formidable flint sickle, struck. You wince, not from any physical pain, but from the sheer symbolic weight of the act. The severing of Uranus's dominion, the literal separation of the sky from the earth, sent shockwaves through the nascent cosmos. From Uranus's spilled essence, new entities sprang forth. The Erinyes or Furies, vengeful goddesses of retribution. The giants, immense, powerful beings, and the Melee, the ash tree nymphs. It was a messy, violent birth, a testament to the chaotic origins of so much in Greek mythology. This peculiar birthing process is definitely a quirky tidbit. Imagine the sheer audacity of an entire pantheon emerging from such a unconventional source. With Uranus overthrown and effectively sidelined, Cronus ascended to become the undisputed ruler of the cosmos. He freed his Titan siblings from Tartarus, and for a time, a new order was established. This was the golden age under Cronus's reign. You might imagine sunshine and rainbows, but remember, this is Greek mythology. Even their golden ages have a sinister undercurrent. It was a time of abundance, yes, when mortals, who were still a bit of a work in progress, mind you, lived in harmony with nature, free from toil and sorrow. They didn't age, didn't suffer, and simply faded away peacefully when their time came. Sounds idyllic, right? Except for the nagging paranoia of the new king. Cronus, having witnessed his own father's downfall due to fear of his children, became consumed by the very same dread. He remembered the prophecy. He too was destined to be overthrown by one of his own offspring. So, in a rather extreme act of preventative parenting, Cronus began to swallow each of his children whole as soon as they were born to his wife and sister, Rhea. Imagine that, a giant, cosmic god-baby gulping down session. You almost feel a sympathetic pang in your own stomach just thinking about it. First Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each swallowed the moment they emerged into the light. Poor Rhea, a goddess of motherhood and fertility, was left heartbroken. Her womb emptied again and again by her paranoid husband. Historians still argue whether this act of devouring was a literal consumption or a symbolic absorption of their powers. But either way, it's not exactly a loving embrace, is it? Rhea, like her mother Gaia before her, eventually reached her breaking point. She longed for a child who would survive, a child who could, perhaps, put an end to Cronus's tyrannical and unsettling habit. So, when she was pregnant with her sixth child, she sought the counsel of Gaia and Uranus, who, despite his earlier unpleasantness, was still a source of ancient wisdom. Together, they devised a plan. When the time came for the birth of her youngest, Rhea traveled in secret to Crete, to a hidden cave on Mount Ida. There, in the deepest secrecy, she gave birth to Zeus. You can almost feel the hushed anticipation, the quiet tension in that ancient cave as a new, vibrant god entered the world, destined to be a king. But what would she give Cronus to fool him? Rhea, with a mother's desperate ingenuity, wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes, making it appear like a newborn infant. She then presented this stone to Cronus, who, in his haste and paranoia, swallowed it without a second thought. You shake your head slowly. Talk about being easily fooled when fear takes over your common sense. The poor, unsuspecting stone went down, and Zeus, the true king in the making, was safely hidden away. Zeus was then spirited away to be raised in secret. Different myths offer different guardians for the infant god. Some say he was nurtured by the nymph Adamant, others by the goat Amalthea, whose horn later became the cornucopia, a symbol of endless abundance. He was fed with goat's milk and honey, raised in the cool, echoing silence of a hidden cave, safe from his monstrous father. You can almost hear the soft bleating of the goat and the gentle hum of bees, a tranquil interlude before the storm of divine conflict. He grew strong, nourished by the earth and protected by loyal, unseen hands, unaware of the cosmic burden that awaited him. This quiet, hidden childhood contrasts sharply with the dramatic, public consumption of his siblings. It's a deliberate choice by Rhea, a strategic move to ensure the survival of the one who would finally challenge Cronus. The universe, still forming its grand narrative, was slowly but surely setting the stage for the next great generational clash. You feel the slow, steady pulse of time, the inexorable march towards destiny, as the hidden infant god grows in strength and purpose. The seeds of revolution, planted by Gaia and nurtured by Rhea, are beginning to sprout. And as you feel the edges of your awareness soften, drifting in the currents of this ancient tale, you sense the calm before the ultimate storm. You're still hovering, aren't you? A silent witness to the unfolding cosmic drama. We left off with baby Zeus, safely tucked away in a hidden cave on Crete, growing stronger by the day. A tiny, divine time bomb ticking away while his oblivious father, Cronus, continued to rule, blissfully unaware he'd swallowed a rock instead of his destiny. The tension in the air, even millennia later, is almost palpable, like the calm before a very, very big storm. As Zeus matured, so did his understanding of his true lineage and the terrible fate of his swallowed siblings. He wasn't some naive farm boy. He was a god, imbued with a powerful destiny. Imagine being a teenager, finding out your dad is a cannibalistic deity, and your brothers and sisters are currently chilling in his stomach. Talk about family therapy issues. He knew what he had to do, guided by the whispers of his grandmother, Gaia, and the desperate hope of his mother, Rhea. This is a mainstream historical fact. The conflict between generations of gods, particularly the overthrow of older gods by younger ones, is a recurring theme in many ancient mythologies, reflecting societal changes and the evolution of power structures. It's almost like a divine version of a corporate takeover, just with more vomiting. The plan to overthrow Cronus was cunning, requiring more than just brute strength. Zeus needed help. He couldn't face the all-powerful Titan king alone. Not yet. So, he sought out his first ally, Métis, the Titan goddess of wisdom and cunning. Now, Métis was not just smart. She was clever. You can almost see the gears turning in her divine mind, formulating a strategy. She gave Zeus a special emetic potion, a concoction designed to make Cronus regurgitate his swallowed children. This specific detail about the potion is a quirky tidbit you might not always remember, but it's crucial. It wasn't a sword or a thunderbolt that brought Cronus down initially. It was a cosmic laxative, a truly humbling end for a tyrannical ruler. Wouldn't you say? Zeus, perhaps disguised as a cupbearer or some other unassuming servant. The myths are a little hazy on the exact delivery method, probably because the writers were more focused on the dramatic outcome, administered the potion to Cronus. The effect was immediate and, for Cronus, profoundly unpleasant. You wince at the imagined cosmic indigestion as Cronus began to vomit. And out they came, in reverse order of their consumption. First the stone he had swallowed, then Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. Imagine the sheer surprise, the disoriented wonder, of these fully grown gods emerging from their father's gut, blinking in the light of a world they had only just entered before being unceremoniously swallowed. Talk about a rude awakening. They were, understandably, eternally grateful to their rescuer, their younger brother, Zeus. This act solidified his position as their leader, the one who had literally pulled them out of a tight spot. Together, these newly liberated gods, the Olympians, formed a formidable alliance against Cronus and the Titans who remained loyal to him. You feel the surge of newfound strength, the collective determination of these powerful beings united against a common foe. The stage was set for the Titanomachy, the great war between the Olympians and the Titans, a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the cosmos for 10 long years. Historians still argue whether this prolonged war was a metaphor for a gradual shift in cosmic order or a literal depiction of immense, drawn-out battles. Either way, it sounds exhausting. The Titanomachy was not a swift victory for the Olympians. The Titans were ancient, powerful, and deeply entrenched. They represented the raw, untamed forces of nature, while the Olympians under Zeus embodied a new order, one of justice, law, and perhaps a touch more sophistication, though they certainly had their moments. The battle raged across the cosmos. Mountains were torn from their roots and hurled as projectiles. The seas boiled, the sky darkened, and the very air crackled with divine energy. You feel the tremor through your ethereal form, the sheer, unimaginable scale of this conflict. It was chaos on a grand scale, a fight for cosmic supremacy. Zeus, though young, proved to be an incredibly strategic and powerful leader. He freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires from Tartarus, where Uranus had imprisoned them. These weren't your typical allies. The Cyclopes were one-eyed giants, master craftsmen, who, in gratitude for their freedom, forged Zeus's most potent weapon, the thunderbolt. Imagine a weapon capable of splitting the sky and shattering mountains. That's a serious upgrade from a flint sickle. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands and 50 heads, were beings of immense strength, capable of hurling massive boulders with terrifying speed and accuracy. Their raw power turned the tide of the war. You hear the roar of their voices, the thunder of their footsteps, and the whistle of hurled stones as they unleash their fury upon the Titans. It's a primal, terrifying symphony of destruction. Armed with the thunderbolt and supported by his powerful siblings and newfound allies, Zeus turned the tide. The sheer might of the Olympians, combined with Zeus's strategic brilliance, gradually overwhelmed the Titans. Cronus himself was finally subdued, stripped of his power. The remaining Titans were defeated, their reign brought to an end. This victory marked a monumental shift in the cosmic hierarchy. The old, chaotic order of the Titans was replaced by the more structured, albeit still tempestuous, reign of the Olympians. You feel the subtle settling of the cosmic dust, the quiet after the storm, as a new era dawns. The defeated Titans, for the most part, were cast down into the darkest depths of Tartarus, imprisoned beneath the earth and guarded by the Hecatonchires, ensuring they could never again threaten the Olympian rule. Cronus, depending on the myth, either joined them in Tartarus or was banished to the distant Isles of the Blessed, a curious blend of harsh punishment and a sort of cosmic retirement. Historians still debate the symbolic significance of these varied fates for Cronus. Was it a final act of mercy, or a testament to his unique position as the fallen patriarch? You decide which feels more fitting for a god who ate his children. With the Titans vanquished, the Olympians now faced the monumental task of establishing their new order. The cosmos, though scarred by the war, was theirs to shape. Zeus, as the undisputed leader, took the throne. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief, or perhaps, a collective shudder, knowing that while the Titans were gone, a new, powerful, and often unpredictable set of rulers had taken their place. You sensed the delicate balance, the immense responsibility that now rested on the shoulders of these young gods. The world, as you know it, is about to take shape. You're still suspended in that cosmic ether, aren't you? The echoes of the Titanomachy are fading, replaced by a new kind of hum, the hum of divine planning, of realms being carved out, of a grand cosmic bureaucracy beginning to take shape. Zeus, the newly crowned king of the gods, has just liberated his siblings from Cronus's stomach and decisively vanquished the Titans. The era of raw, primordial power is giving way to a more organized, albeit still very dramatic system. With the Titans safely locked away, mostly, the victorious Olympians faced a new challenge: how to divide up the vast, freshly conquered cosmos. It wasn't exactly a friendly game of rock, paper, scissors. You can imagine the divine squabbles, the jostling for prime real estate. Zeus, as the eldest and the one who led the charge, naturally took the most prestigious position, becoming the king of the gods and the ruler of the sky, wielding that shiny new thunderbolt. Think of him as the CEO of the universe with all the big decisions and even bigger lightning strikes. This is a mainstream historical fact. The division of cosmic domains among the three brothers, Zeus, sky, Poseidon, sea, and Hades, underworld, is a cornerstone of Greek mythology, establishing the primary spheres of influence for the major male deities. But what about his brothers? To avoid endless bickering and to establish a semblance of order, they drew lots. Yes, the rulers of the universe, deciding their domains with a divine lottery. You can almost hear the nervous shuffling of feet, the collective holding of breath as the fates were decided. Poseidon drew the lot of the sea, becoming the lord of the oceans, his trident symbolizing his immense power over the vast, turbulent waters. And Hades, well, he drew the short straw, receiving the gloomy and often misunderstood underworld. Not exactly beachfront property, but someone had to manage the dead, right? You feel the cool, damp chill that emanates from Hades's future realm, a stark contrast to the brilliant expanse of Zeus's sky or Poseidon's endless blue. The other major deities also found their place on Mount Olympus, the highest peak in Greece, which became their official home and seat of power. This wasn't just a mountain. It was a grand, ethereal palace, often shrouded in clouds, inaccessible to mortals. Imagine a divine gated community, complete with endless ambrosia and nectar, their food and drink, basically the cosmic equivalent of champagne and caviar. You feel the thin, crisp air of the mountaintop, charged with divine energy, as if the very atmosphere vibrates with their presence. So, who else joined the celestial VIP club? There was Hera, Zeus's sister and eventually his often aggrieved wife, who became the queen of the gods, goddess of marriage and childbirth. She had a penchant for elaborate vengeance against Zeus's numerous romantic conquests, making her a rather formidable and frequently irritated figure. You can almost hear her exasperated sigh, echoing through the halls of Olympus, whenever Zeus looked in the direction of a pretty nymph. Then came Demeter, goddess of agriculture and the harvest, whose moods dictated the seasons. When she grieved, the earth withered. When she rejoiced, it bloomed. You sensed the deep connection she had with the land, the very life cycles of the mortal world tied to her emotional state. Talk about having a bad day and it being everyone's problem. Hestia, the eldest sister, chose a quieter, more domestic role. She was the goddess of the hearth and home, the protector of the family. She famously gave up her seat on the Olympian Council to Dionysus, preferring the warmth and stability of the hearth over the drama of divine politics. She's the unsung hero of the family, always keeping the home fires burning, literally. She's also a quirky tidbit, as she's often forgotten in the more dramatic tales, embodying quiet permanence amidst cosmic chaos. And then, of course, there were Zeus's children, many of them born after the Titanomachy, who gradually filled out the Olympian roster. Athena, born from Zeus's head, but we'll get to that spectacular entrance later, became the goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts. She was a strategic thinker, a skilled warrior, and a patron of heroes. You can sense her sharp intellect, her decisive presence, even from afar. Apollo, god of music, poetry, light, healing, and archery. He was often depicted with his lyre, his golden arrows, and his radiant presence. He's the kind of god who would make even a cloudy day feel a bit brighter. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, was the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, the moon, and childbirth. She was fierce, independent, and a protector of the innocent. You feel the untamed freedom of the wild flowing through her, a spirit untamed by any restraint. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Born from the sea foam, specifically from Uranus's remains after Cronus did his thing, she was irresistibly beautiful and often caused quite a stir wherever she went. She was the cosmic equivalent of a supermodel, only with more divine power. Hephaestus, the lame smith god, god of fire, metallurgy, and crafts. Despite his physical deformities, often attributed to being thrown from Olympus by Zeus. He was a master craftsman, forging weapons and exquisite objects for the gods. He's the hard-working, behind-the-scenes genius, probably humming while he works in his fiery forge. Ares, the god of war, bloodlust, and violence. He was often impulsive and destructive, contrasting sharply with Athena's strategic approach to warfare. He's the hothead of the family, always looking for a fight. You feel his raw, untamed aggression, a contrast to the more calculated power of his Olympian kin. And finally, Hermes, the nimble messenger god of trade, travelers, sports, athletes, and border crossings, and a psychopomp, guide to the underworld. He was quick-witted, charming, and could move between the worlds of gods, mortals, and the dead with incredible speed. He's the ultimate multitasker, probably checking his divine smartphone while delivering messages. So, this core group of 12, later adjusted with the addition of Dionysus and the occasional guest star, formed the Olympian Council. They gathered in their grand halls on Mount Olympus, debating, feasting, making decrees, and often getting into spectacular arguments. You imagine the golden light filling the vast hall, the murmur of their divine voices, sometimes harmonious, sometimes clashing like thunder. This establishment of a relatively stable, structured hierarchy is a significant mainstream historical fact, representing a move from primordial chaos to a more ordered, albeit still very dramatic, divine governance. The Olympians, unlike the raw, elemental titans, were often depicted with human-like qualities and flaws: envy, pride, lust, anger, compassion. This made them relatable, even when their actions were devastatingly powerful. They were powerful but not entirely alien. This personalization of the divine is a key aspect of Greek mythology, allowing mortals to project their own experiences and understanding onto the gods. Historians still argue whether this anthropomorphism was a deliberate storytelling device or a reflection of early human psychology struggling to comprehend abstract forces. You're drifting now, the voices of the Olympians becoming a distant hum, their forms shimmering like heat haze on a summer day. The cosmic stage is fully set, the principal actors are in place, each with their own domain, personality, and power. The era of the Olympians has truly begun, and with it, the stories, the rivalries, and the interactions with the fledgling mortal world that will define Greek mythology for millennia to come. You're still suspended in that shimmering, cosmic space, aren't you? The grand halls of Olympus are now bustling with the newly established divine government. Zeus is on his throne, Thunderbolt casually propped nearby, and his siblings and children are settling into their respective domains, each radiating a distinct aura of power and personality. The universe, once a chaotic maelstrom, now feels a bit more organized, like a very exclusive, very powerful celestial country club. And within this divine tapestry, you turn your attention to one particular figure, a goddess who would become synonymous with wisdom, strategy, and one very important tree. We're talking about Athena, and her birth story is, shall we say, unique. Forget the usual stork delivery or even the slightly more dramatic but still conventional birthing process. Athena came into the world with a bang, literally. Remember Métis, the Titaness of wisdom, who helped Zeus make Cronus throw up his siblings? Well, Zeus, in a move that echoed his father's paranoia, because apparently family habits die hard even among gods, was told by an oracle that Métis would bear him 2 children. First, a daughter who would rival him in wisdom and strength, and then a son who would eventually overthrow him. Talk about a problematic prophecy. This is a mainstream historical fact. The story of Zeus swallowing Métis is a key myth that highlights Zeus's cunning and his efforts to absorb or overcome challenges to his authority, often through unconventional means. Zeus, ever the clever strategist, and perhaps a bit of a control freak, decided to take matters into his own hands. Before Métis could give birth to any more potentially throne-usurping offspring, he swallowed her whole. Yes, another god-swallowing incident. It seems to have been a popular solution to problems back then. You can almost feel the cosmic burp that followed. The idea was to absorb her wisdom and cunning, thereby preventing the prophecy from coming to pass. And for a while, it seemed to work. Zeus felt wiser, smarter, more insightful than ever before. He thought he'd dodged a bullet, or rather a thunderbolt. But fate, even for the king of the gods, is a tricky thing. Soon after, Zeus developed a splitting headache. Not just a minor ache, mind you, but a cosmic migraine, the kind that makes you want to curl up in a fetal position and banish half the universe. The pain grew unbearable, hammering at his divine skull. He tried everything, lying down, meditating, probably even some divine ambrosia-infused pain relievers. Nothing worked. The headache persisted, throbbing with an intensity that threatened to shatter his very composure. You can almost hear his groans echoing across Olympus, making the other gods roll their eyes. Oh, Zeus and his dramatic headaches again. Finally, desperate for relief, Zeus called upon Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, the ultimate problem solver with a hammer. Hephaestus, Zeus roared, his voice booming with pain. Split my head open. I can't take it anymore. Now, imagine being Hephaestus. Your boss, the most powerful being in the cosmos, is demanding you take an axe to his skull. Talk about job pressure. But Hephaestus, ever the dutiful and skilled craftsman, complied. This grisly detail of the axe and the head splitting is a quirky tidbit that always gets a reaction. It's not every day you hear about a goddess emerging from a cranial cavity. With a mighty swing of his double-headed axe, Hephaestus cleaved open Zeus's head. And what emerged was not gore or brains, but something far more magnificent and unexpected. From Zeus's skull, fully grown and fully armed, sprang Athena. She wasn't a baby, she wasn't a child. She was a mature, formidable goddess, clad in gleaming armor, wielding a spear, and letting out a mighty war cry that reverberated across the cosmos. You can almost hear the triumphant cry, a clarion call that announced her dramatic arrival, scattering any lingering sleep from your mind for a fleeting moment. Imagine the scene on Olympus. The other gods probably lounging around, enjoying their ambrosia, suddenly witnessing this incredible, almost shocking, birth. Their eyes wide with awe, perhaps a touch of fear. She was magnificent, a testament to wisdom, strength, and strategic prowess. Her birth wasn't messy. It was orderly and decisive, reflecting her very nature. This immediate maturity, her springing forth fully formed and armed, speaks volumes about her innate abilities and her destiny as a goddess of war, strategy, and wisdom. Athena became Zeus's favorite child, a sort of intellectual companion and trusted advisor. She embodied his wisdom and strategic thinking, without the impulsiveness or emotional drama that often plagued his other children. She was rational, logical, and fiercely intelligent. You feel the cool, clear presence of her intellect, a stark contrast to the often fiery passions of other gods. She became the patron of heroes, revered for her strategic brilliance in battle, her skill in handicrafts, particularly weaving and pottery, and her unwavering sense of justice. She was the kind of goddess you wanted on your team, whether you were fighting a war or trying to win a debate. Her symbols, the owl, for wisdom, and the olive tree, which we'll get to soon, reflect her multifaceted nature. She was not just a warrior. She was a builder, a creator, a patron of civilization. You sense the depth of her understanding, her ability to see beyond the immediate, to plan and execute with precision. Historians still argue whether Athena's unique birth story reflects a patriarchal attempt to diminish the role of the mother, or if it symbolizes the idea that wisdom, métis, comes directly from the mind, Zeus's head. It's a fun thought experiment to ponder as you drift deeper into the story. So here she is, Athena, fully formed and formidable, taking her rightful place among the Olympians. She doesn't have the bluster of Ares, the unpredictability of Poseidon, or the fiery passion of Aphrodite. Instead, she possesses a calm, strategic intellect, a quiet power that makes her one of the most respected and influential deities on Mount Olympus. Her presence adds a layer of intellectual rigor and military prowess to the divine assembly. And as you contemplate this unique origin, you feel the gentle tug of sleep pulling you deeper into the quietude, ready for the next chapter in the unfolding saga of the gods. You're still floating, a quiet observer in the grand theater of the gods, aren't you? The cosmic stage is set, Olympus is bustling, and Athena, having made her rather spectacular entrance from Zeus's skull, is now firmly established as a force to be reckoned with. But as with any divine family, there are always rivalries, and our focus now shifts to one of the most powerful and often tempestuous members of the Olympian pantheon, Poseidon. Remember that divine lottery? While Zeus got the sky and Hades got the underworld, Poseidon drew the vast, unpredictable oceans. And let me tell you, he took to his domain like a fish to water, literally. He became the lord of the sea, commanding its immense power, its swirling currents, and its mighty waves. Imagine having dominion over 3/4 of the planet's surface. That's some serious real estate. You feel the deep, resonant thrum of the ocean in your ethereal being, the ceaseless motion of countless tides, the immense, silent pressure of the deep. It's a powerful, elemental force, much like the god who rules it. This is a mainstream historical fact. Poseidon's association with the sea, earthquakes, and horses is deeply ingrained in ancient Greek culture, reflecting their dependence on maritime trade and their experience with seismic activity. Poseidon wasn't just king of the fish, mind you. He rode a chariot pulled by hippocampi, creatures with the head and forelegs of a horse and the tail of a fish, across the waves, his trident in hand, commanding the very waters to obey his will. When he was pleased, the seas were calm, the winds fair, and sailors could navigate safely. But when he was angry, and Poseidon had quite a temper, let me tell you, well, that's when things got interesting. You can almost feel the tremor of his rage, the way the calm surface of the water would suddenly roil and churn, a terrifying display of raw, untamed power. His fury could conjure up devastating storms, colossal tidal waves, and shipwrecks that swallowed entire fleets. He was known as the Earthshaker because when he struck the ground with his trident, earthquakes would rip through the land, splitting mountains and creating chasms. Think about it, a god who could cause both tsunamis and earthquakes. He was essentially a walking natural disaster if you didn't keep on his good side. You hear the deep rumble, feel the subtle shift beneath you, as if the very ground is alive and restless, mirroring Poseidon's tempestuous nature. Beyond his dominion over water, Poseidon was also associated with horses. It's a quirky tidbit that might seem odd for a sea god, but the myth goes that he was the creator of the horse, bringing it forth from the earth with a strike of his trident. Some myths even say he invented chariots. So he wasn't just sailing the seas, he was galloping across the land, too. This dual association hints at his broad influence over both maritime and terrestrial domains, a god whose power transcended the immediate boundaries of his watery realm. Poseidon was also, like his brother Zeus, quite the romantic, and his numerous affairs often led to the birth of a variety of offspring, both divine and monstrous. From the fearsome Cyclops Polyphemus to the winged horse Pegasus, his children were as diverse and unpredictable as the ocean itself. You can almost hear the whispered tales of his encounters, the ripple of excitement and fear that followed his unpredictable passions. He wasn't as overtly political as Zeus, but his influence was undeniable, a mighty force that demanded respect and, often, fear. His palace, located deep beneath the waves near the island of Aegae, was a magnificent structure of gold and coral, adorned with pearls and shimmering shells. Imagine living in a palace where the walls are made of living coral, and schools of iridescent fish swim past your windows. It sounds rather idyllic, doesn't it? But even in this splendor, you sense the inherent wildness of his nature, the restlessness that lay beneath the calm surface of his oceanic kingdom. Despite his immense power, Poseidon harbored a certain resentment towards Zeus. He felt that, as an elder brother, he should have had a more prominent role, perhaps even co-rule with Zeus. This underlying tension often manifested in their interactions, leading to squabbles and rivalries that often had significant consequences for mortals. You feel the subtle undercurrent of this sibling rivalry, a quiet hum of unspoken competition that constantly ran through their divine relationship. Historians still argue whether this rivalry reflects genuine power struggles within early Greek society or simply serves as a narrative device to create dramatic tension among the gods. Poseidon was worshipped extensively by sailors, fishermen, and coastal communities, who desperately sought his favor for safe passage and bountiful catches. Temples dedicated to him dotted the coastlines, and countless sacrifices were made in his honor. His temper was legendary, and appeasing him was paramount for anyone venturing out onto the treacherous waters. You hear the rhythmic chanting of ancient mariners, the prayers whispered on the wind, all directed at the mighty lord of the deep, hoping to avert his terrible wrath. So, while Athena embodies strategic intellect and controlled power, Poseidon represents raw, untamed might, the unpredictable forces of nature that can both give life and take it away. He is the ocean, vast, deep, mysterious, and utterly formidable. And as you feel the gentle sway of your consciousness, like a boat on a calm sea, you realize that these two powerful deities, with their contrasting natures and immense influence, are on a collision course, destined to vie for the patronage of a budding mortal city. The stage is set for a truly epic divine contest, one that will determine the fate of a fledgling civilization. You're still gently adrift, a quiet observer of the divine drama unfolding, aren't you? We've met the major players, from the all-powerful Zeus to the fiery Ares, and just left off with the tempestuous Poseidon, lord of the seas and shaker of the earth. Now, let's zoom out a bit and appreciate the sheer variety of personalities swirling around on Mount Olympus. These aren't just powerful beings. They're characters, each with their own quirks, rivalries, and very human-like flaws, despite their divine status. You feel the subtle shift in the air, a kaleidoscope of divine temperaments, each radiating a unique energy. Consider Zeus, the king. He's powerful, charismatic, and ultimately in charge, but also prone to fits of rage and, famously, infidelity. He's the big boss, the one who can literally bring down the thunder, but also the one who's constantly trying to hide his latest romantic escapade from his perpetually aggrieved wife, Hera. You can almost hear Hera's exasperated sighs echoing across Olympus whenever a new nymph or mortal catches Zeus's eye. She, in turn, is the embodiment of jealousy and vengeance, a fierce protector of marriage vows, even if her husband consistently breaks them. Her power lies in her regal authority and her ability to unleash truly epic bouts of divine spite. This complex dynamic between Zeus and Hera is a mainstream historical fact, often seen as reflecting the power struggles and societal norms within ancient Greek family structures. Then there's Athena, our protagonist for tonight's tale, who we saw burst forth from Zeus's head. She stands out. While other gods might be driven by emotion or raw power, Athena is the embodiment of cool, strategic intellect. She doesn't rely on brute strength. She relies on cunning, planning, and wisdom. She's the goddess you call when you need a problem solved, not just smashed. You sense her calm, analytical gaze, her ability to see the chessboard of conflict miles ahead. She's logical, often detached, and incredibly effective. She represents the reasoned approach, a stark contrast to her half-brother Ares, the god of war. Ares. He's the embodiment of battle lust, the chaotic, destructive side of warfare. He revels in the clanging of swords and the smell of blood. He's impulsive, hot-headed, and often gets into trouble, even for a god. He's the kind of guy who picks a fight just for the fun of it, a stark contrast to Athena's strategic, disciplined approach to conflict. You feel the surge of his raw, aggressive energy, a primal urge for combat that feels almost intoxicating in its intensity. This contrast between Ares and Athena in warfare is a quirky tidbit, showing that even within the domain of war, the Greeks distinguished between savage brutality and strategic brilliance. And let's not forget the artistic, passionate gods. Apollo, the golden boy, with his lyre and his radiant light, represents harmony, order, and prophecy. He's the patron of the arts, the healer, the sun god. His twin sister, Artemis, is the wild, untamed spirit of the hunt, a fierce protector of nature and young maidens. She embodies independence and a deep connection to the wilderness. You hear the whisper of her arrows through the ancient forests, the rustle of leaves as she moves with silent grace. Then there's Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, whose very presence could inspire desire and chaos. She's often portrayed as vain and manipulative, using her allure to get what she wants, often leading to dramatic consequences for mortals and gods alike. You feel the intoxicating pull of her charm, a power that could twist destinies and ignite passions. She often finds herself at odds with Hera, who disapproves of her carefree approach to relationships. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, is a fascinating counterpoint to the glamour of his fellow Olympians. Lame and often ostracized for his appearance, he finds his strength and worth in his craftsmanship. He builds the magnificent palaces, the gleaming armor, the magical devices that the other gods use. He's the quiet genius, the one who makes things work, proving that true power isn't always about physical perfection or charisma. You hear the rhythmic clang of his hammer, the hiss of steam, the smell of hot metal, a testament to his tireless dedication. Hermes, the swift messenger, is the ultimate intermediary. He zips between worlds, carrying messages, guiding souls, and even playing a few tricks along the way. He's charming, clever, and often serves as the god's voice to the mortal world. He's the ultimate networker, always knowing what's going on and usually having a witty remark ready. You feel the rush of wind as he passes, a blur of motion and quick thought. And then there's Hades, ruling the underworld. While not strictly one of the Olympian 12, he rarely visits the mountain, preferring his gloomy domain. His influence is immense. He's often seen as grim and aloof, a stark contrast to the boisterous life on Olympus. His domain is one of finality, of judgment, and of untold riches deep within the earth. You feel the profound quiet of his realm, the weight of countless souls passing through, a constant reminder of mortality. Historians still argue whether Hades was originally a truly malevolent figure or simply a dispassionate guardian of the dead, reflecting changing societal views on death. The interactions between these divine personalities were a constant source of drama and entertainment for the ancient Greeks. They weren't just abstract forces. They were a dysfunctional family writ large, mirroring the human condition with all its complexities. Their squabbles, their alliances, their loves, and their hates shaped the very fabric of the universe and dictated the fates of mortals. You understand that these gods were not perfect. They were powerful, yes, but also flawed, relatable, and utterly fascinating. Their divine imperfections made their stories resonate with human experiences. This pantheon, with its distinct personalities and overlapping domains, provided a rich tapestry for storytelling, a way for ancient Greeks to understand the forces of nature, the complexities of human emotion, and the unpredictable nature of fate. Their stories weren't just entertainment. They were explanations, moral lessons, and reflections of the world around them. And as you feel the gentle hum of their combined energies, the distinct vibrations of each divine personality, you realize that this intricate web of relationships is about to become very relevant to a certain burgeoning mortal city. The stage is perfectly set for a rivalry that will define one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. You're still suspended in that timeless space, aren't you? The grand, sometimes chaotic, personalities of the Olympians are now vividly clear in your mind, each one a force unto themselves. From Zeus's booming authority to Aphrodite's alluring charm, you've gotten a sense of the divine dynamics at play. But while the gods were busy squabbling and establishing their celestial pecking order on Mount Olympus, something else was stirring far below, something much smaller, much more fragile, yet ultimately just as significant: the emergence of mortals. You feel a subtle shift in perspective, a zoom in from the vastness of the cosmos to the humble beginnings of human life. In the earliest myths, the relationship between gods and mortals was often fluid, almost indistinguishable. There was no clear line, just beings existing. But as the Olympian order solidified, so too did the distinction between the immortal and the mortal. You imagine the very first humans, small and vulnerable, appearing on the vast, untamed landscape of the newly ordered world. They weren't born with divine powers or cosmic knowledge. They were simply there, trying to make sense of a world shaped by unseen, powerful forces. This initial separation of gods and humans is a mainstream historical fact, reflecting a growing complexity in religious thought and the establishment of distinct divine and human spheres. Early mortals lived a simple, often hardscrabble existence. They were hunter-gatherers, living off the land, constantly at the mercy of the elements and the whims of the gods. You feel the chill of the morning dew on their bare feet, the roughness of the animal hides they wore, the constant gnawing of hunger. Their lives were short, often brutal, and entirely focused on survival. There were no cities, no grand structures, just scattered encampments and crude shelters. They looked up at the sky, at the sun, the moon, and the stars, and saw the manifestations of the very gods who held their fates in their hands. The gods, for their part, weren't always benevolent. They were powerful, capricious, and often meddlesome. They might send a bountiful harvest, or a devastating drought. They might inspire courage in battle, or strike someone down with a sudden plague. Mortals learned quickly that appeasing the gods was crucial. They developed simple rituals, offered small sacrifices, a portion of their meager hunt, a handful of grain, hoping to earn divine favor or, at the very least, avoid divine wrath. You hear the simple chants, the earnest prayers whispered to the dawn, a desperate plea for recognition from the powerful beings above. One of the quirky tidbits about this early period is the myth of the 4 ages of man: the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The Golden Age, under Cronus, was supposedly a time of peace and abundance, where mortals lived without toil or sorrow. The subsequent ages saw a decline in human virtue and an increase in suffering, culminating in the harsh Iron Age, the age in which most of the known myths take place. It's a rather pessimistic view of human progress, isn't it? Like humanity peaked early and then just kept sliding downhill. Historians still argue whether this myth was a nostalgic lament for a lost past or a philosophical commentary on the nature of human moral decline. As generations passed, mortals began to develop basic skills. They learned to farm, to domesticate animals, to weave cloth, and to work metals. You feel the satisfaction of their first successful harvest, the warmth of the first fire they built on a cold night, the simple pride in a well-crafted tool. These were significant steps, allowing them to move beyond mere survival and begin to build something more enduring. Small communities began to form, people gathering together for protection, for shared labor, for the simple comfort of companionship. These weren't cities yet, but they were the embryonic beginnings of civilization, tiny flickering lights in a vast, untamed world. The gods often interacted directly with mortals during this period, sometimes for love, sometimes for war, sometimes simply out of curiosity. Heroes were born from these unions, demigods who bridged the gap between the divine and the human, performing great feats that shaped the mortal world. You hear the legends of these early heroes, their strength and courage echoing through the nascent human consciousness. They were the intermediaries, the conduits through which divine power often flowed into the mortal realm. It was a time of innocence for humanity, but also a time of extreme vulnerability. Mortals were like children, learning to walk, often stumbling, always dependent on the benevolence, or at least the indifference, of their powerful parents, the gods. They were unaware of the intricate rivalries playing out on Olympus, the petty squabbles, the deep-seated resentments. They only felt the effects: a sudden storm, a blessing of fertility, a devastating plague. Their lives were a direct reflection of the divine moods, a precarious dance on the edge of cosmic power. You watch as these tiny human communities begin to grow, to learn, to adapt. They are driven by a fundamental need for survival, yes, but also by a burgeoning desire for stability, for protection, for order. They are beginning to seek something more than mere subsistence. They are seeking meaning, purpose, and a sense of place in a world dominated by giants and gods. This yearning for divine guidance, for a patron, would soon become a driving force in their development. As you feel your own awareness expanding to encompass these tiny, yet incredibly significant, human endeavors, you recognize the growing need for a divine connection, a protector, a guide. The stage is being set, not just for a divine contest, but for the very foundation of a civilization. And as the gentle lull of the narrative carries you deeper, you sense the quiet hope emanating from these early mortals, a hope that will soon converge with the ambitions of 2 powerful Olympians. You're still gently hovering above the ancient world, aren't you? We've just observed the tentative, often perilous, early lives of mortals, small communities struggling for existence, slowly learning to farm, to build, to survive. Now, as the human population slowly grew, A new, transformative phenomenon began to take shape: the emergence of cities. You feel a subtle shift in the landscape below, from scattered homesteads to something more organized, more permanent, radiating a nascent sense of community and ambition. Imagine the dawn of a new concept: permanence. Instead of constantly moving to follow game or find new fertile ground, early human groups began to settle. Why? Perhaps the land was especially bountiful, the water source reliable, or the natural defenses strong. Whatever the reason, the idea of building something that would last, something beyond a temporary shelter, began to take root in the human mind. You feel the slow, deliberate rhythm of hands shaping mud bricks, of stones being stacked one upon another, of timber being cut and fitted. This wasn't just survival. This was creation. These early settlements were more than just collections of huts. They were places where people could specialize. No longer did everyone have to hunt or gather. Some could farm, others could weave, others could craft tools. This specialization led to trade, to the exchange of goods and ideas, and ultimately to innovation. You hear the faint murmur of voices, the clatter of early tools, the soft rhythm of daily life unfolding in a way that had never been possible before. This process of urbanization, of people gathering into more organized, larger settlements, is a mainstream historical fact, marking a pivotal transition in human history from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to more complex agricultural and ultimately civilized ones. As these communities grew, so did their needs. They needed more efficient ways to manage resources, to defend themselves from external threats, and to establish laws and order within their burgeoning populations. Leaders emerged: chiefs, elders, eventually kings, who could organize labor, command armies, and resolve disputes. You sense the delicate balance between individual freedom and communal necessity, the slow, often painful birth of governance. The development of fortified walls is a particularly striking aspect of these early cities. A wall wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a psychological one, a demarcation between the chaos of the outside world and the relative safety and order within. It was a visible statement: we are here to stay. This is our home. This is our city. You can almost feel the reassuring solidity of those first defensive structures, a collective sigh of relief from people who had always been vulnerable to external dangers. This focus on defense is a quirky tidbit that often goes overlooked when we imagine grand ancient cities. They weren't just hubs of culture, they were fortresses born out of necessity. These nascent cities also became centers of worship. As communities grew, their relationship with the gods became more formalized. Instead of individual offerings, there were communal rituals, public sacrifices, and eventually dedicated temples. The gods were no longer just distant, unseen forces. They were patrons, protectors, integral to the well-being and prosperity of the entire city. You hear the rhythmic chants of communal prayer, the collective voices rising to the heavens, a unified plea for divine favor and protection. The concept of a city-state began to take shape, an independent urban center that governed itself and the surrounding territory. These were not vast empires, but self-contained entities, fiercely proud and often fiercely competitive with their neighbors. Each city aspired to be prosperous, powerful, and blessed by the gods. Their success was seen as a direct reflection of divine favor, and their failures a sign of divine displeasure. Historians still argue whether the development of the city-state fostered greater innovation due to competition or led to perpetual warfare, ultimately hindering broader regional development. You can sense the ambition rising from these early urban centers, a collective desire to thrive, to grow, to leave a lasting mark on the world. They sought not just survival, but prestige, glory, and the favor of the mightiest deities. This aspiration, this collective dream of a flourishing city, would become the very spark for our main narrative tonight. They needed a divine patron, a powerful deity who would watch over them, protect them, and ensure their prosperity. As you float above these developing settlements, you see the bustling activity, the organized chaos of human endeavor, the slow but steady march towards what we would recognize as civilization. The fields are cultivated, the markets are forming, and the foundations of civic life are being laid. These aren't yet the grand metropolises of later antiquity, but they are the crucial first steps, the proving grounds where human ingenuity and communal spirit truly began to shine. And it's one such nascent city, nestled in a particularly promising region, that will soon become the focal point of a very significant divine contest. The stage for our central myth is slowly but surely coming into focus. You're still drifting, aren't you? Hovering just above the ancient landmass that will one day be called Greece, watching as those fragile early human communities coalesce into something more substantial, more ambitious: cities. And it's one particular region, now coming into sharp focus below you, that truly captures your attention. We're talking about Attica. You feel the warm, dry air, scented with wild herbs and the distant tang of the sea, a landscape that is both rugged and surprisingly fertile. Imagine looking down upon this ancient land. Attica isn't a vast, sprawling plain like some other regions. Instead, it's a peninsula, almost an island, jutting out into the sparkling Aegean Sea. To its east, south, and west, the endless blue of the water stretches to the horizon. To the north, a rugged spine of mountains, Pernita, Penteli, Hymettus, provides a natural barrier, protecting it from invaders and separating it from the rest of mainland Greece. You trace these natural boundaries, recognizing the strategic advantage they offered. This geographical isolation is a mainstream historical fact that played a crucial role in Attica's development, fostering a unique cultural identity. The land itself is not uniformly fertile. Much of it is rocky, arid, and best suited for olive groves and vineyards, not vast fields of grain. You see the silvery green shimmer of countless olive trees, their gnarled trunks testament to their ancient lineage, clinging stubbornly to the hillsides. You also spot patches of richer, redder soil in the plains, particularly around the central heart of the region. This contrast, between the stony hills and the pockets of fertile ground, made self-sufficiency a challenge, but also encouraged ingenuity and resourcefulness. But what Attica lacked in agricultural vastness, it more than made up for in other natural resources. Its coastline was abundant with natural harbors, perfect for seafaring and trade. You hear the faint lapping of waves against hidden coves, the distant cry of gulls, hinting at a future deeply intertwined with the sea. This maritime potential meant access to distant markets, the exchange of goods, and the vital flow of ideas from across the Aegean. Perhaps most importantly, Attica was rich in marble and silver. You see the gleam of white rock faces on Mount Penteli, waiting to be quarried, materials that would one day build some of the most iconic structures in human history. And deep beneath the earth, veins of silver promised wealth and power, resources that could fund armies, build navies, and attract skilled artisans. This natural endowment of building materials and precious metals is a quirky tidbit that might surprise you, given the focus on agriculture for early civilizations. It speaks to a different kind of prosperity than just growing food. At the heart of this region, perched on a defensible hill, was a nascent settlement, a collection of humble dwellings and a crude defensive wall. This was the original Acropolis, a high point providing a natural stronghold and a vantage point over the surrounding plains and the sea. This wasn't yet the glorious Acropolis you might picture from history books, but its strategic importance was clear from the very beginning. You feel the ancient earth beneath this hill, humming with the promise of greatness. The climate of Attica, Mediterranean and temperate, meant long, hot, dry summers and mild, wet winters. This climate was ideal for certain crops, especially olives and grapes, which would become central to the region's economy and culture. You feel the gentle warmth of the sun on your skin, the light breeze rustling through the olive leaves, a pleasant contrast to the turbulent cosmic energies you've witnessed. As you gaze upon this specific landscape, you recognize its potential. It wasn't the most fertile land, nor the most strategically dominant in every way, but it offered a unique combination of natural defenses, access to the sea, and valuable resources. It was a place where a powerful city could thrive, a city that could leverage its location and its ingenuity to become a beacon of civilization. The people living here, simple farmers and nascent traders, possessed a growing ambition, a desire for prosperity and protection that transcended their humble beginnings. They understood, perhaps instinctively, that for their settlement to truly flourish, it needed divine patronage. It needed a powerful god or goddess to watch over it, to bless its endeavors, and to provide guidance and prosperity. This was not a unique desire. Most ancient cities sought a divine protector. But for this particular settlement in Attica, the choice of patron would be uniquely contested, and the outcome would define its very essence. Historians still argue whether the choice of patron deity for ancient cities was more a reflection of existing cultural practices or a strategic decision to align with a perceived source of power. You can almost hear the whispered conversations of the early inhabitants, their hopes and fears carried on the gentle breeze. They were looking for a sign, a symbol, a protector who would elevate their humble settlement into something grander, something that would echo through the ages. And as you feel the quiet anticipation of these ancient people, you realize that two powerful Olympians are already turning their attention to this very spot, each seeing its potential, each desiring its loyalty. The stage is perfectly set for the next chapter of our story, where divine ambition meets mortal aspiration. You're still hovering, a silent observer above the sun-drenched hills of Attica, aren't you? You've seen the potential of this region. Its strategic location, its natural harbors, its marble and silver, and the industrious, hopeful people beginning to gather on its central hill, dreaming of something more than just survival. This burgeoning settlement, this collection of early homes and nascent walls, held immense promise. And as you sense their collective aspiration, you understand why a city, especially one on the cusp of greatness, would deeply desire divine patronage. Imagine being one of those early mortals. Your life is hard, unpredictable. The forces of nature, storms, droughts, earthquakes, seem to operate on an inscrutable will. Success in agriculture, in trade, in defense all feels precariously balanced on unseen scales. In such a world, a connection to the divine isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. It's a spiritual insurance policy, a direct line to the cosmic powers that govern their very existence. You feel the deep human need for protection, for guidance, for a sense of order in a chaotic world. This inherent desire for divine favor is a mainstream historical fact, fundamental to the religious practices of nearly all ancient civilizations. Seeking patronage wasn't just about religious piety. It was also intensely practical. A city under the protection of a powerful god or goddess was believed to be more likely to prosper. The deity would bless their crops, guide their ships, protect their walls from invaders, and inspire their leaders with wisdom. It was like having the ultimate cosmic guardian angel, but one who could also smite your enemies with lightning or tidal waves if provoked. You hear the earnest prayers rising from the modest shrines, the hope in the voices of the people as they lay their offerings before rough-hewn altars. The choice of patron deity also reflected the values and aspirations of the community. A city might align itself with a god of war if its primary concern was defense, or a goddess of agriculture if its survival depended on the harvest. It was a declaration of identity, a statement about what mattered most to that particular group of people. You sense the collective consciousness of this early settlement, their unspoken hopes crystallizing into a desire for a powerful, benevolent protector. This wasn't a simple, unilateral decision made by the mortals. The gods themselves often had desires. They sought worshippers, loyalty, and the glory that came from having a thriving city dedicated to their name. It was a symbiotic relationship. Mortals offered devotion and sacrifice, and in return, the gods offered protection and prosperity. Think of it as a divine sponsorship deal, but with much higher stakes. You can almost see the Olympian gods, peering down from their cloud-shrouded mountain, weighing the potential of various mortal settlements, considering where their influence might best be placed. For this particular settlement in Attica, the stakes were even higher. It was growing, showing immense promise, and its strategic location meant it could become a significant player in the wider ancient world. These people were resourceful, adaptable, and clearly had a strong future ahead of them. This potential made it a highly desirable prize in the eyes of certain Olympians. You feel the gravitational pull of ambition, both human and divine, converging on this one promising spot. One of the quirky tidbits about this era is that different cities often claimed different origin myths for their founding or patronage, sometimes even conflicting ones. This highlights the competitive nature of the city-states and their desire to establish unique, prestigious divine connections. It wasn't enough to just have a god. You wanted the best god, or at least a god whose story was more impressive than your neighbor's. This kind of divine marketing was subtle but pervasive. The people of this burgeoning Attican settlement understood that they couldn't just choose a god. The god had to choose them, or at least be persuaded to extend their patronage. This often led to contests or demonstrations of divine power and benevolence, where various deities would present their offerings, seeking to prove their worth and secure the city's allegiance. You sense the anticipation building, the quiet prayers for a clear sign, a divine decision that would guide their future. Historians still argue whether these contests were literal events or allegorical tales, designed to explain a city's foundational myths and the attributes of its chosen deity. And as you feel the slow, steady pulse of human aspiration, a deep longing for security and prosperity, you realize that two immensely powerful Olympians are already vying for this prize. Their eyes are fixed on this small, yet promising human endeavor, each convinced that they are the rightful patron. The decision, when it comes, will not just shape a city. It will echo through millennia, defining a civilization. The stage is perfectly set for the divine contest that will give this famous city its enduring name. You're still poised above the ancient world, aren't you? The quiet aspirations of the fledgling Attican settlement are almost audible, a collective hum of hope and a yearning for divine protection. You sense the delicate balance of this moment, a city on the cusp of greatness, seeking a powerful patron. And now, your focus narrows to the two divine heavyweights who have turned their gaze upon this promising spot, each determined to claim it as their own. Athena and Poseidon. We've already gotten to know these two quite well. On one side, you have Athena, fresh from her spectacular birth from Zeus's head. She embodies strategic wisdom, reasoned warfare, and practical craftsmanship. You feel her sharp intellect, her calm, calculating demeanor, a goddess who thinks several steps ahead, always favoring foresight over brute force. She's the kind of goddess who would advise you to build strong alliances and plan your escape route, not just charge headfirst into battle. Her presence brings an aura of intellectual rigor and disciplined power. This inherent contrast between Athena's strategic approach and other deities' brute force is a mainstream historical fact, often highlighted in myths where she outmaneuvers opponents. On the other side stands Poseidon, the mighty lord of the seas, the earthshaker with his formidable trident. He's raw power personified, tempestuous, unpredictable, capable of immense creation and equally immense destruction. You feel the deep, resonant thrum of the ocean in his presence, the untamed energy that can calm a storm or raise a devastating tsunami with equal ease. He is the force of nature, primal and commanding, embodying the vast, uncontrollable power of the natural world. He's the kind of god who would smash through a problem rather than think around it. His rivalry with Zeus, a subtle undercurrent you've already sensed, adds another layer to his ambition. These two Olympians, despite being uncle and niece, a common family dynamic on Olympus, for better or worse, had vastly different natures and therefore, vastly different ideas about what would benefit a burgeoning city. Poseidon, as ruler of the seas, saw the coastal location of Attica as a natural extension of his domain. He envisioned a powerful maritime city, its harbors bustling with ships, its people skilled sailors and traders, forever reliant on the bounty and pathways of the ocean. He saw the potential for naval dominance, for trade routes that stretched across the known world, all under his mighty patronage. You sense his expansive vision, the boundless horizons that his domain offered. Athena, however, saw the potential of the land itself, the rocky soil, yes, but also the possibilities for cultivation, for skilled crafts, for reasoned governance. She envisioned a city of thinkers, artisans, and just laws, a place where wisdom and strategic thinking would prevail. She saw not just a port, but a cultural hub, a center of learning and innovation, a place where civilization would truly flourish. You feel the quiet certainty of her vision, a future built on intellect and sustainable prosperity. The problem? Both desired to be the patron deity of this same promising city. Neither was willing to yield, as the glory of having a major city named after and dedicated to them was immense. It wasn't just about territory, it was about prestige, about influence, about validating their particular domains and philosophies. You feel the tension building, the clash of two mighty wills converging on one unsuspecting mortal settlement. The solution, as determined by Zeus and the other Olympians, was a contest. A divine competition, where each god would present a gift to the people of the city. The mortals, along with a panel of divine judges, would then decide which gift was more valuable, more beneficial to their city's future. This direct engagement between gods and mortals, where humans play a role in a divine decision, is a quirky tidbit, setting this myth apart from many others where mortals are simply pawns. It gives the human inhabitants a surprising amount of agency in their own destiny. The site chosen for this grand contest was the Acropolis itself, the very hill where the city was beginning to take shape. Imagine the grand spectacle. The gathered Olympians, their divine forms radiating power, the nervous mortals gathered below, their future hanging in the balance. The air would have crackled with anticipation, the weight of the moment almost unbearable. Historians still argue whether the legendary contest between Athena and Poseidon was a literal event or a powerful allegorical tale designed to explain the city's identity, its reliance on both sea and land, and the specific attributes of its patron goddess. Regardless, the narrative serves to explain why Athens became the city it was. A naval power, yes, but also a center of philosophy, art, and democratic thought, guided by the principles Athena represented. As you feel the quiet hum of expectation, the mingling of divine ambition and mortal hope, you realize that the stage is now fully set. The two contenders are ready, the judges are assembled, and the fledgling city awaits its fate. The moment of decision is drawing near, a moment that will forever etch this particular tale into the fabric of history and myth. And as you prepare to witness the gifts, the anticipation might just keep you awake a little longer. You're still poised there, aren't you? A silent witness, high above the rugged beauty of Attica, feeling the electric anticipation that hangs in the air. The stage for the great divine contest is now fully set. We have the ambitious, burgeoning settlement, eager for a patron. We have the two mighty contenders, the strategic Athena and the tempestuous Poseidon. And now, the rest of the Olympian pantheon begins to gather. You sense the arrival of divine VIPs, a hush falling over the landscape as the most powerful beings in the cosmos take their places to witness this momentous decision. Imagine the scene on the Acropolis, that sacred rock rising majestically from the plains of Attica. It's not yet adorned with the magnificent temples you might know from history books. No, it's a wilder, rawer place, but already imbued with a sense of destiny. At the summit, the 12 Olympian gods convene, presided over by Zeus himself. You feel the immense presence of each deity, their distinct energies mingling in the air, creating a truly awe-inspiring spectacle. Zeus, majestic on his temporary throne, casts a stern gaze over the proceedings, ensuring impartiality, or at least, the appearance of it. Hera, ever watchful, might be subtly adjusting her elaborate headdress. Apollo and Artemis perhaps exchanging knowing glances. Hermes, ever ready to deliver messages or keep order, hovers nearby. Even the usually reclusive Hades might have sent a shadowy representative, curious about the outcome. Below them, gathered on the slopes of the Acropolis, are the mortal inhabitants of the nascent city. They are farmers, artisans, and nascent leaders, their faces upturned, a mixture of awe, hope, and trepidation in their eyes. They are the ultimate beneficiaries or victims of this divine showdown. You feel their collective breath held, their future hanging by a thread of divine decision. This inclusion of mortals as witnesses and partial adjudicators is a mainstream historical fact, emphasizing the symbiotic relationship between gods and humans in Greek religious thought. Their presence lends legitimacy to the divine outcome. The atmosphere is thick with expectation. The sun beats down on the rocky earth, but a cool breeze occasionally sweeps up from the sea, a subtle reminder of Poseidon's looming presence. There's a palpable tension, not just because of the impending divine show, but because the stakes are so incredibly high for the mortals. This isn't just a friendly game. It's a decision that will shape their destiny, their economy, their very identity for millennia to come. You hear the hushed whispers of the crowd, the almost reverent silence that descends as Zeus raises his hand. Zeus begins by declaring the terms of the contest. Each god will present a gift, something that they believe will be most beneficial to the city and its people. The gathered gods and the mortals, who, in some versions of the myth, get a vote or at least signify their preference, will then judge which gift is superior. It's a divine talent show, with the future of a city as the grand prize. This setup for a contest, where deities compete for patronage, is a quirky tidbit you don't always see, showcasing a surprisingly democratic element in divine decision-making. The ground chosen for the demonstration is a flat, open space on the Acropolis, cleared for the purpose. You see the rough, uneven stones, waiting to bear the marks of divine power. There are no elaborate decorations, no grand stands, just the raw earth and the vast sky. The simplicity of the setting heightens the drama, focusing all attention on the two contenders and their impending offerings. Poseidon, ever the dramatic one, steps forward first. You feel a subtle tremor beneath you, a deep rumble that hints at his immense power over the earth and sea. His trident, gleaming with the moisture of the deep, is held aloft. You sense his confidence, his certainty that his gift, born of his vast domain, will be undeniably superior. He is, after all, a king accustomed to having his way. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's initial offering was always a spring, or if other, grander geological feats were attributed to him in earlier, perhaps lost, versions of the myth. The scene is set for the first demonstration of divine power. The air crackles with anticipation. The mortals lean forward, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. The silence is profound, broken only by the whisper of the wind and the distant lapping of the waves. You are about to witness the raw, untamed might of the Lord of the Sea and the immediate powerful impact of his chosen gift. The moment of truth has arrived, and the future of this fledgling city hangs, quite literally, in the balance. You're still there, poised above the Acropolis, aren't you? The air is thick with anticipation. The Olympians assembled, the mortals hushed, their eyes fixed on the powerful figure of Poseidon. He stands on the sacred rock, trident held high, radiating the raw, untamed might of the oceans. You feel the very ground beneath you vibrate faintly, a prelude to the immense force about to be unleashed. Poseidon, ever the dramatic one, raises his trident, his powerful arm flexing. There's a gleam in his eye, a hint of his tempestuous nature, confident that his offering will be irresistible. With a mighty, resounding blow, he strikes the hard, dry earth of the Acropolis. You flinch slightly, feeling the shockwave reverberate through your ethereal form. The sound is like thunder, a crack that seems to split the very air. Dust and small rocks explode upwards, and for a moment, the sun is obscured by a cloud of pulverized earth. This striking of the ground is a mainstream historical fact, a quintessential act of Poseidon's power, showcasing his dominion over earthquakes and the land itself. And then, from the spot where his trident struck, water begins to gush forth. Not just a trickle, but a spring, bubbling up from the seemingly barren rock, a symbol of life and sustenance in a dry land. A gasp ripples through the crowd of mortals. Water. In a region often plagued by droughts, a fresh water source would be an invaluable gift, a true blessing. You feel the immediate surge of hope from the gathered people, their collective relief palpable. Imagine the sheer wonder of seeing water burst from solid rock at the command of a god. It's a miracle, a testament to divine power. But then, as the spring continued to flow, a strange realization dawned. You notice it first, a subtle, briny tang carried on the breeze. The mortals, closer to the source, begin to recoil, murmuring amongst themselves. The water, clear and seemingly pristine, was salty, undrinkable. It was seawater, not the life-giving fresh water they desperately needed for their crops, their families, their very survival. You hear the collective sigh of disappointment, the sudden deflation of hope that had swelled just moments before. It was a cruel irony, a powerful display that yielded a largely useless gift. Poseidon, perhaps sensing the shift in the mood, or simply too proud to acknowledge the inadequacy of his offering, still stood tall, his expression unreadable. He had given them water, hadn't he? An infinite supply, straight from his boundless domain. What more could they ask for? This oversight, this failure to understand the practical needs of mortals, is a quirky tidbit about Poseidon's character. He was powerful, but sometimes lacked the nuanced understanding of human necessities. He offered a grand, impressive display of his oceanic might, but not something truly useful for a land-based civilization. The spring, later known as the Erechtheus Spring, flowed with its briny water, a stark reminder of Poseidon's power, but also his temperament. It served as a monument to his presence, perhaps, but not a source of thriving life for the city's inhabitants. The salty taste was a bitter disappointment, turning a potential blessing into a reminder of a god's slightly off-target generosity. You can almost taste the salt on your tongue, a sharp, unpleasant memory of dashed hopes. The other Olympians, acting as judges, remained silent, their expressions unreadable. They had witnessed the immense power, the dramatic flourish. But they had also seen the practical outcome, the reaction of the mortals. Zeus, on his throne, perhaps raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement or contemplation crossing his face. Even a king of the gods could appreciate a good spectacle, but he also understood the subtle complexities of beneficial gifts. The tension, though briefly alleviated by the burst of water, now returned, albeit with a different flavor. It was no longer about anticipation. It was about evaluation. Poseidon had made his play, a powerful, undeniable display of his might. But was it the right gift? Was it truly what this burgeoning city needed to thrive? The answer, implicitly conveyed by the faces of the disappointed mortals, was a resounding, silent no. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's gift was genuinely useless, or if it held some symbolic significance for a future naval power, representing the sea's essential but perhaps not immediately life-sustaining role. Some interpretations suggest it highlighted the harsh realities of relying solely on maritime resources for a city. But for the thirsty mortals watching that day, it was simply undrinkable. As Poseidon stepped back, a slight furrow perhaps in his brow, the stage was now clear for his rival. The first contestant had presented his offering, and while it was impressive in its display of power, it fell short in its practical application. The moment had passed, and the disappointment of the mortals settled like a fine dust over the Acropolis. Now all eyes turned to Athena, silent and observant, ready to present her gift and perhaps offer a solution that truly met the needs of the aspiring city. You're still there, poised above the Acropolis, aren't you? The air, still faintly smelling of salt and damp earth from Poseidon's ambitious but ultimately disappointing offering, now crackles with a different kind of energy. The Lord of the Sea has presented his gift, a powerful but largely useless salty spring, leaving the mortals with a collective sigh of disappointment. Now, all eyes turn to Athena, who steps forward, embodying a calm, collected wisdom that starkly contrasts with Poseidon's tempestuous display. You sense her quiet confidence, not born of arrogance, but of deep understanding. She doesn't need to strike the earth with a dramatic flourish or unleash a geyser of water. Her power is more subtle, more profound, rooted in creation and sustenance rather than raw force. You feel the focused intensity of her gaze, scanning the land, recognizing its potential, and understanding the true, practical needs of the people gathered below. This measured approach, favoring utility over spectacle, is a mainstream historical fact that defines Athena's character, particularly in contrast to more impulsive deities. Athena doesn't waste time with grand gestures. She simply kneels, or some myths say she merely points her spear towards a spot on the rocky ground. And then, from that barren earth, something extraordinary begins to grow. Slowly at first, then with increasing vigor, a small sapling emerges. You watch in quiet awe as it stretches upwards, its slender trunk strengthening, its silvery green leaves unfurling with remarkable speed. It's not a sudden, explosive burst, but a gentle, undeniable act of creation. Within moments, the sapling transforms into a mature olive tree. It stands there, sturdy and resilient, its branches heavy with fruit. You can almost feel the smooth, waxy texture of its leaves, the subtle, earthy scent of its bark. It's a living, breathing testament to her foresight and generosity. The simplicity of her act, devoid of the dramatic showmanship of Poseidon, speaks volumes about her practicality. This planting of the olive tree is a quirky tidbit in a world of thunderbolts and tidal waves. Yet it's a gift that resonates deeply with human needs. A murmur ripples through the crowd of mortals, this time not of disappointment, but of growing understanding and awe. They knew the olive tree. They understood its immense value. The olive tree wasn't just a plant. It was a cornerstone of their existence, offering a multitude of benefits that went far beyond a single drink of water. You hear their hushed exclamations, their eyes widening as they grasp the profound utility of this humble yet powerful gift. Athena then addresses the assembled gods and mortals, her voice clear and resonant, explaining the manifold virtues of her gift. She speaks of its fruit, which could be pressed for olive oil, a vital resource for light, cooking, and anointing. Imagine the endless possibilities. Lamps to banish the night, sustenance for their families, a balm for their skin. She speaks of its wood, durable and useful for building, for tools, and for fuel. You envision sturdy shelters, finely crafted implements, and warm fires on cold nights, all thanks to this single tree. She speaks of its leaves, which could be used for wreaths, for medicine, for their very symbolism of peace and prosperity. But beyond the practical applications, the olive tree represented something deeper. It symbolized peace, prosperity, and enduring life. It was a long-lived tree, providing sustenance for generations, a symbol of stability and continuity. It was also remarkably resilient, thriving in the very rocky, dry soil of Attica, requiring little water once established. It was a gift perfectly suited to the land, embodying sustainability and long-term vision. You feel the deep connection between the tree and the people, a bond of mutual support and enduring growth. The contrast between the two gifts was stark. Poseidon's offering was immediate, powerful, and ultimately undrinkable. Athena's was a long-term investment, quiet in its presentation but immeasurable in its practical benefits. One offered raw, untamed power, the other sustainable civilization. One represented the fleeting moment, the other enduring prosperity. This difference in utility and vision is what set Athena's gift apart. The Olympians, as judges, surely noted the immediate reaction of the mortals. Their faces, once crestfallen after Poseidon's spring, now glowed with a renewed sense of hope and recognition. They saw the value, the genuine benefit, that Athena's gift offered for their daily lives and their future prosperity. It wasn't just a spectacle. It was a solution. Historians still argue whether the olive tree's prevalence in Attica inspired the myth, or if the myth itself further cemented its cultural and economic importance in the region. Either way, the connection is undeniable. As Athena stood back, her expression serene, a quiet hum of satisfaction permeated the air. She had not only presented a gift, but had also demonstrated her deep understanding of human needs and her commitment to fostering a thriving, civilized society. The stage was now set for the final judgment, a decision that would not only name a city but define its character for all time. And as you feel the quiet reverence for this enduring symbol of life and peace, you sense the gentle pull of sleep, awaiting the verdict. You're still poised there, aren't you? A silent witness to the divine contest unfolding on the sun-drenched Acropolis. The air, once heavy with anticipation, is now filled with the subtle aroma of olive leaves, a stark contrast to the lingering salt tang from Poseidon's ill-fated spring. Athena has just presented her gift, a thriving olive tree, and its tangible, life-sustaining value resonates deeply with the gathered mortals. Now comes the moment of truth, judging the gifts. Imagine the profound silence that descends upon the assembly. The Olympian gods, each a deity of immense power and distinct personality, now turn their collective attention to the two offerings. You feel the weight of their gaze, the silent contemplation as they weigh the raw power of Poseidon's saltwater geyser against the quiet utility of Athena's olive tree. This wasn't just a beauty contest. It was a deliberation about the very essence of civilization, about what truly benefits humanity. This act of divine judgment is a mainstream historical fact, a recurring motif in Greek mythology where the gods intervene directly in mortal affairs, often acting as arbiters. Zeus, as the supreme judge, holds court, his gaze moving between the two offerings and then to the faces of the mortals. He understands that a gift, no matter how powerful, is only as good as its practical application. He saw the initial excitement for Poseidon's spring, and then the swift disappointment as its briny nature was revealed. He now sees the quiet, profound appreciation radiating from the mortals as they gaze upon Athena's olive tree, recognizing its countless benefits. You sense his shrewd assessment, his understanding that true leadership often involves practical solutions, not just dazzling displays. The other Olympian judges, seated around Zeus, also weigh in, sometimes with subtle gestures, sometimes with quiet murmurs. Hera, goddess of marriage and domesticity, likely appreciated the olive tree's domestic utility. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, would certainly favor a plant that provided food and oil. Even Hephaestus, the craftsman god, would recognize the value of its wood and oil for various trades. You imagine their collective wisdom, their various perspectives converging on a single, crucial understanding: what truly sustains life and fosters civilization. Poseidon, for his part, stood by, probably fuming, his expression a mixture of indignation and frustration. He had offered immense power, a boundless resource. How could a mere tree, no matter how versatile, compare to the raw might of the ocean? He represented the old order of immense, untamed forces, a contrast to Athena's vision of ordered, cultivated progress. You feel his simmering resentment, the clash between his raw power and Athena's strategic wisdom. His perception of what was valuable was rooted in sheer force, rather than practical utility. Athena, however, remained calm, her demeanor serene and confident. She knew the value of her gift, not just in its immediate benefits, but in its long-term potential for the city. She had offered a source of food, light, fuel, and materials, things that would allow a city to thrive independently, to build its economy, and to sustain its population for generations. Her gift spoke of prosperity, peace, and cultural development, not just raw survival or military might. This strategic foresight is a quirky tidbit about Athena. She always thinks about the implications of a gift, not just its immediate impression. The deliberation wasn't just about the practicalities. It was also symbolic. Poseidon's gift, while powerful, represented the dangers and unpredictability of the sea. It offered a connection to maritime power, but also brought with it the inherent risks of storms and invasions from the waves. Athena's olive tree, on the other hand, symbolized peace, resilience, agricultural prosperity, and the steady growth of civilization. It represented a grounded, self-sufficient future. You feel the weight of these symbolic meanings, understanding that this decision went beyond mere utility to define the very character of the city. The voices of the mortals, though not empowered to make the final divine decree, were clearly heard. Their palpable disappointment with the saltwater spring and their enthusiastic reception of the olive tree spoke louder than any formal vote. Their need was for practical, sustainable resources, not grand but ultimately useless displays of power. Historians still argue whether the mortal vote was a democratic ideal projected onto myth or a historical reflection of priestly influence in city-state decision-making. Regardless, their preference was clear. As the divine judges concluded their deliberations, a solemn silence once again fell over the Acropolis. The decision was made. The future of this fledgling city, its name, its prosperity, its very identity, was about to be sealed by the wisdom of the Olympians. You feel the slow, steady drumbeat of destiny, the inevitable conclusion drawing near. The tension, which had ebbed and flowed with the gifts, now reached its peak. The outcome would be a definitive statement about the values cherished by the new Olympian order. You're still poised there, aren't you? The quiet hum of anticipation on the Acropolis is almost deafening as the Olympian judges conclude their deliberations. The scent of olive leaves mingles with the lingering tang of salt, a sensory reminder of the two competing gifts. The mortals below hold their breath, their hopes pinned on a decision that will define their very future. And now, Zeus, the king of the gods, prepares to deliver the verdict, the culmination of the great contest. You feel a ripple of energy pass through the assembled deities as Zeus rises from his throne. His presence alone commands attention, his voice capable of shaking the heavens. He raises a hand, and an absolute silence descends upon the Acropolis, so profound you could almost hear a feather drop, if feathers existed in this divine realm. Every eye, mortal and immortal alike, is fixed on him, awaiting the pronouncement that will change history. This formal declaration by Zeus is a mainstream historical fact, showcasing his ultimate authority as the arbiter of divine disputes. Zeus begins by acknowledging the power and generosity of both Poseidon and Athena. He speaks of Poseidon's immense might, his dominion over the seas, and the impressive display of the saltwater spring. You sense a touch of deference in his tone, a nod to his powerful brother, but also a hint of regret that the gift, for all its power, was not what the people truly needed. He then turns his gaze to Athena, acknowledging her foresight and the practical, enduring value of her olive tree. He emphasizes its multifaceted benefits for the long-term sustenance and prosperity of the city. The arguments for Athena's gift were compelling. The olive tree provided food, light, fuel, and building materials. It was a symbol of peace, of civilization, of a settled existence. It thrived in the very soil of Attica, requiring minimal water once established, a perfect fit for the region's climate. Poseidon's spring, while a grand display, was unusable for drinking or agriculture, leaving the city reliant on external sources, or at the mercy of the sea. It was, in essence, a beautiful but impractical gesture. You hear the internal arguments, the logical progression that led to the inevitable conclusion. Then Zeus delivers the decree. His voice booms, clear and resonant, echoing across the Acropolis and beyond. The vote, he declares, has been cast. The decision has been made. The gift that the assembled gods, and implicitly the mortals, have deemed most valuable, most beneficial to the future of the city, is Athena's olive tree. A collective cheer erupts from the mortal crowd below, a wave of relief and joy washing over the sacred hill. You feel the surge of their happiness, their gratitude for a decision that promised genuine prosperity and a stable future. For them, it was clear. The olive tree was a gift of life, a foundation for their burgeoning civilization. They had made their preference known, and the gods, in this instance, had listened. Poseidon, upon hearing the verdict, is furious. You feel the tremor of his divine rage, the air growing heavy and turbulent around him. He had been so certain of his victory, so convinced that his display of raw power would sway the judges. His face darkens, and he raises his trident, perhaps threatening to unleash a storm or an earthquake upon the very land that had rejected him. The sea, in the distance, seems to churn in sympathy with his anger. This immediate outburst is a quirky tidbit about Poseidon. He was rarely one to take defeat gracefully. It's almost a given that, when he loses, there's going to be some dramatic weather event. But Zeus, ever the reigning authority, intervenes, calming his brother. He reminds Poseidon of the fairness of the contest and the wisdom of the decision. Perhaps he also subtly flexes his own power, reminding Poseidon who truly holds the thunderbolt. The tension lingers, but Poseidon, grumbling, eventually withdraws, his anger still simmering, but unable to overturn the decree of the Olympian Council. You feel the lingering resentment, a deep-seated frustration that would continue to color his interactions with the city and its patron goddess. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's anger and subsequent actions, like droughts or floods, were truly divine retribution, or simply an explanation for natural disasters attributed to a powerful but spurned god. With Poseidon's anger subdued, the victory of Athena is complete. Her wisdom, her strategic foresight, and her practical understanding of mortal needs have triumphed over brute force and flashy display. The olive tree stands proudly on the Acropolis, a living monument to her victory and a promise of enduring prosperity for the city. The atmosphere shifts from tense judgment to one of triumph and celebration for Athena. The other Olympians offer their congratulations, recognizing the profound impact of her gift. The mortals, now openly cheering, begin to express their devotion and gratitude to their new patron goddess. The foundation of a lasting bond between a city and its divine protector has been forged. The stage is perfectly set for the city to be given its name, solidifying its identity and its destiny. And as you feel the quiet joy radiating from the triumphant goddess and her newfound worshippers, you realize that a new chapter in the story of humanity and the gods is about to begin. The long journey to sleep continues as the next pivotal step is taken. You're still there, aren't you? Poised above the sun-drenched Acropolis, feeling the lingering tremors of divine frustration from Poseidon, but more importantly, basking in the quiet triumph of Athena. The olive tree stands tall, a testament to her victory, and the cheers of the mortals still echo in the ancient air. The contest is over, the judgment rendered, and now the logical, inevitable next step. Athens named. Imagine the profound significance of this moment. For centuries, this burgeoning settlement on the Attican Peninsula had been nameless, or perhaps known by some transient, descriptive moniker. But now, having been chosen by the goddess of wisdom, of strategic warfare, of crafts and civilization, it was time for it to receive its true, eternal identity. You feel the collective anticipation of the mortals below, their eyes shining with pride and a newfound sense of belonging. To be named after a god or goddess was not just an honor. It was a blessing, a statement of divine favor that would imbue the city with the very essence of its patron. This act of naming, linking a city directly to its patron deity, is a mainstream historical fact, common in ancient cultures as a way to forge a profound identity and secure divine protection. With Zeus's pronouncement still ringing in the air, confirming Athena's victory, the natural consequence followed. The city would henceforth be known as Athens, a direct honor to its new divine protector. Her name, a symbol of wisdom and strategic thought, would forever be etched into the very fabric of the city's identity. You hear the name, spoken for the first time with such authority, resonating through the air, claiming its place in history. It's not just a word, it's a destiny. The significance of this naming cannot be overstated. It wasn't merely a formality, it was a powerful act of cosmic branding. By bearing Athena's name, the city implicitly adopted her values. It was a city that would, in theory, prioritize intellect over brute strength, strategic planning over impulsive action, and the arts and crafts over mere conquest. This foundational identity, shaped by its patron goddess, would influence everything from its architecture to its philosophy, its governance to its military strategy. You sense the very spirit of Athena settling over the nascent city, guiding its future growth. This is why, centuries later, Athens would become renowned as a center of philosophy, democracy, and the arts, a beacon of civilization in the ancient world. The seeds of that intellectual and cultural flowering were, in a mythical sense, sown on this very day, when the olive tree was chosen over the saltwater spring. It cemented Athena's influence and provided a guiding ethos for the city's development. You can almost see the future Parthenon, her magnificent temple, rising proudly on that very Acropolis, a testament to this foundational moment. For the mortals, the naming of Athens was a moment of immense civic pride. They were no longer just a collection of people living in a defensible spot. They were Athenians chosen by a powerful and benevolent goddess. This shared identity would foster a sense of unity and purpose, inspiring them to build a city worthy of their divine patroness. You feel the surge of collective identity, the profound sense of belonging that comes with being part of something larger and divinely sanctioned. Of course, Poseidon's lingering resentment was also a factor. While he could not overturn the divine decree, his displeasure often manifested in later myths as natural disasters, droughts, floods, or even naval defeats. It's a quirky tidbit that even after losing the contest, a spurned god could still wield considerable influence, reminding the city that while they had chosen their patron, they couldn't entirely escape the wrath of a powerful deity. This dynamic created a fascinating tension in the city's relationship with the sea, recognizing its vital role while also acknowledging its potential for destruction. Historians still argue whether these post-contest acts of divine spite were just storytelling embellishments or attempts to rationalize the unpredictable forces of nature in a polytheistic worldview. The legend states that the original olive tree planted by Athena on the Acropolis continued to grow and thrive for centuries, even being miraculously reborn after its destruction during the Persian Wars. This enduring symbol became a powerful emblem of Athenian resilience and the unbreakable bond between the city and its patron goddess. You imagine its ancient roots gripping the rock, its leaves whispering tales of its divine origin through the ages. As the sun begins to dip lower in the mythical sky over Attica, casting long shadows across the nascent city now officially called Athens, you feel a sense of completion for this particular chapter. A fundamental step has been taken. The city has its name, its patron, and its defining symbol. Its future trajectory has been largely set, influenced by the wisdom of Athena and the enduring legacy of her practical gift. The gentle lull of the evening air begins to embrace you, as the story of the origin of Athens gently fades into the background, leaving you with the quiet satisfaction of having witnessed a pivotal moment in ancient history. You're still gently suspended above the ancient world, aren't you? The sun has set on that momentous day on the Acropolis. The cheers of Athens have faded into the twilight, and the olive tree stands as a silent sentinel to a destiny now sealed. You've witnessed the cosmic lottery, the titanomachy, the dramatic birth of Athena, and the great contest that finally gave the city its name. Now, as the divine drama settles, you turn your gaze to the more subtle, yet equally profound, ways in which the divine vote shaped the city. It wasn't just about a name, it was about the very soul of Athens. By choosing Athena, the Athenians were implicitly aligning themselves with her virtues. You feel the subtle shift in the air, a quiet emphasis on certain qualities: wisdom, strategic thinking, arts, crafts, and a certain logical approach to problems. This alignment meant that the city would ideally foster these attributes in its citizens, encouraging intellectual pursuits, skilled craftsmanship, and a reasoned approach to governance and warfare. This influence of a patron deity on a city's cultural and political identity is a mainstream historical fact, deeply embedded in ancient Greek belief systems. Imagine the early Athenian leaders consulting their patroness. They wouldn't build a city solely focused on military might like Sparta or on sheer naval dominance, though the sea was still vital. Instead, they would strive for a balance, a city that was strong in defense but also rich in culture, knowledge, and reasoned debate. The olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity through hard work and cultivation, perfectly embodied this ethos. You see the faint outlines of future academies, of bustling workshops, and of public forums where citizens would gather to discuss ideas, all stemming from this foundational choice. The choice of Athena also had implications for the role of women in Athenian society. While Athenian women generally had restricted roles compared to men, Athena herself was a powerful, independent female deity, unburdened by romantic entanglements, respected for her intellect and strategic prowess. Her patronage offered a certain divine precedent for female intelligence and strength, even if its real-world manifestation was limited. This nuanced aspect of her influence is a quirky tidbit, showcasing the complexities of divine symbolism versus social reality. The ongoing tension with Poseidon, despite the formal vote, also continued to shape Athens. While Athena was their primary patron, the Athenians never forgot the powerful sea god. They understood that their coastal location meant they would always be influenced by the sea, for good or ill. They built a powerful navy, becoming a dominant maritime force in the Aegean, which might seem ironic given Poseidon's loss. But perhaps it was a pragmatic recognition that even with Athena's wisdom, they still needed to master the very element that a spurned god commanded. You hear the creak of timber, the slap of waves against hulls, the shouts of sailors, all acknowledging the sea's immense, inescapable power. Historians still argue whether Athens' eventual naval prowess was despite or in some way because of its ongoing respect, and perhaps fear, for Poseidon, demonstrating a practical approach to religious belief. The olive tree itself became more than just a symbol. It was an economic backbone. Olive oil became a primary export, a source of immense wealth and influence. It fueled their lamps, nourished their bodies, and provided income that allowed for grand public works and cultural flourishing. The very landscape of Attica, with its suitability for olive cultivation, seemed to confirm Athena's foresight. You smell the rich, earthy scent of olive oil, a staple of ancient life, now flowing in abundance thanks to their patron goddess. This divine choice, made on the Acropolis, set Athens on a distinct path, different from its neighbors. Sparta, for instance, revered Ares and Artemis, gods of war and the hunt, reflecting their militaristic society. Corinth, a major maritime power, had strong ties to Poseidon. Each city's patron deity became a mirror reflecting its core values and aspirations. Athens, under Athena, aspired to intellectual and cultural excellence, underpinned by strategic strength. You can trace the ripple effect of that single divine decision through centuries of Athenian history. The architectural wonders, the philosophical schools, the dramatic theaters, the democratic innovations, all can be seen, in a mythical sense, as manifestations of Athena's guiding influence. She inspired them to build, to think, to create, and to govern themselves with a sense of reasoned order. As the quiet of the night settles deeper around you, and the story of Athena's triumph and its profound implications for Athens fades into a gentle hum, you realize the enduring power of these ancient myths. They weren't just stories. They were blueprints for civilization, explanations for identity, and reflections of the aspirations of an entire people. The legacy of that divine vote, cast millennia ago, continues to echo through the corridors of history, shaping your understanding of one of the greatest cities the world has ever known. You're still gently suspended, aren't you? The quiet whispers of Athenian history, born from Athena's triumph, are now a soft murmur in your awareness. You've seen how a single divine vote shaped a city's very identity. But as the story unfolds, as with any grand narrative, there are always other perspectives, other figures who play their part, often with their own frustrations and continued influence. Our gaze now shifts, even briefly, to the enduring presence and, frankly, the aftermath for Poseidon. Imagine the scene again. Poseidon, his face darkened with rage, his mighty trident held aloft, after Zeus declared Athena the victor. You felt the tremor of his fury, the sea itself seeming to churn in sympathy with his wounded pride. He, the mighty lord of the seas, had offered a gift of boundless water, a raw display of his elemental power, only to be rejected in favor of a mere tree. It was a cosmic insult, a public humiliation for a god accustomed to unquestioning adoration and dominion. This raw, emotional reaction from a deity is a mainstream historical fact, showing that even gods are susceptible to pride and vengeance. His initial outburst, though quickly quelled by Zeus's authority, didn't mean his anger simply evaporated. Oh no, divine resentments, like the tides, ebb and flow, but rarely disappear entirely. You sense the lingering bitterness, a low, continuous rumble beneath the surface of his vast oceanic domain. While he couldn't overturn the Olympians' decree, he certainly didn't forget the slight. A spurned god, especially one as powerful and tempestuous as Poseidon, was a force to be reckoned with even in defeat. This enduring frustration often manifested in various ways throughout later Athenian history, at least in mythical explanations. While Athens flourished under Athena's patronage, becoming a naval power and a center of trade, it was also periodically subjected to droughts, floods, and destructive storms, calamities often attributed to Poseidon's lingering wrath. You can almost feel the dry wind carrying dust across the olive groves during a drought, or the sudden, terrifying rush of floodwaters through a valley, and hear the whispers of the Athenians. Poseidon is angry. This attribution of natural disasters to divine displeasure is a quirky tidbit, reflecting how ancient peoples sought to understand and explain the unpredictable forces of nature through the lens of their pantheon. Consider the Athenian reliance on the sea. They built a formidable navy, their ships sailing across the Aegean, establishing trade routes and engaging in naval battles. This was, paradoxically, Poseidon's realm. While Athena might bless their strategy and their shipbuilders, their very existence as a maritime power placed them in constant interaction with the dominion of the god who had lost the contest. It created a fascinating dynamic, respectful reverence for their patron Athena, but also a healthy, pragmatic fear and appeasement of Poseidon, whose unpredictable moods could spell ruin for their fleets. You hear the prayers of sailors before setting out, the extra sacrifices offered at coastal shrines, all aimed at placating the disgruntled sea god. Historians still argue whether the legendary animosity between Poseidon and Athens truly reflects an underlying geological instability of the region, prone to earthquakes, or simply serves as a narrative device to explain the perennial challenges faced by a maritime power. Perhaps it was a way to acknowledge the dual nature of the sea itself, a source of life and opportunity, but also of immense danger and destruction. Regardless, the myth provided a powerful explanation for the unpredictable forces that shaped their lives. Despite his occasional acts of divine displeasure, Poseidon remained an incredibly important god for the Athenians. They still built temples to him, albeit perhaps with a bit more cautious deference than to Athena. They participated in festivals in his honor, like the Panathenaic Games, which included naval contests. They understood that even a disgruntled god needed to be respected and appeased, especially one whose realm bordered their city. You sense the ongoing negotiation, the careful balance of worship and pragmatism that characterized Athens' relationship with its powerful, spurned neighbor. So, while Athena's victory cemented her as the primary patron, Poseidon's presence was never truly absent. He was the perpetual other god, the formidable force that reminded Athens of its vulnerabilities, even amidst its triumphs. His lingering frustration served as a constant backdrop to their maritime endeavors and agricultural cycles, a subtle undercurrent in the grand narrative of the city. As you feel the gentle undulation of the story, like the slow swell of the ocean itself, you recognize that even defeated gods leave their mark. The aftermath for Poseidon wasn't an erasure, but a continuous, sometimes turbulent, presence in the life of the city that bore his rival's name. And as you drift further into the quietude, the echoes of divine resentment mingle with the soft hum of the night, preparing you for deeper sleep. You're still softly suspended, aren't you? The whispers of ancient myths continue to weave their spell around you, as we drift past the initial divine conflict and its immediate aftermath for Athens and the disgruntled Poseidon. You've witnessed the shaping of a city's very identity, determined by the wisdom of Athena. But the influence of the gods, particularly the victorious Athena, wasn't just about naming a city. It extended deeply into Athenian life and values, shaping the very essence of its culture. Imagine walking through the early streets of Athens, perhaps a few generations after the contest. You'd feel a distinct atmosphere, a subtle emphasis on certain qualities. The olive tree, that gift from Athena, would be ubiquitous. Its groves would dot the landscape, its oil flowing freely, a constant, tangible reminder of their patroness's bounty. This prominence of the olive tree in their daily lives, as a source of food, light, and trade, is a mainstream historical fact, central to the Athenian economy and culture. You can almost smell the rich, earthy scent of the oil, a foundation of their sustenance. But Athena's influence went far beyond agriculture. As the goddess of wisdom and strategy, she inspired the Athenians to value intellect and reasoned thought. You can almost hear the nascent philosophical debates beginning to stir in the agora, the public marketplace. The focus wasn't just on strength or conquest, but on the power of ideas, on logic, on rhetoric. This reverence for intellectual pursuit would eventually lead to the rise of thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, shaping Western thought for millennia. You feel the buzz of intellectual curiosity, the thrill of reasoned argument, beginning to define the spirit of the city. She was also the goddess of crafts and practical arts. This meant that Athenian artisans were not merely laborers. They were seen as embodying a divine skill. Potters, weavers, sculptors, metalworkers, all found inspiration and patronage in Athena. You imagine the meticulous hands of a potter shaping clay, the rhythmic click of a loom, the precise strike of a sculptor's chisel, each act in homage to their patron. This emphasis on skilled craftsmanship led to the creation of exquisite pottery, intricate textiles, and the magnificent marble sculptures that are still admired today. This dedication to craft is a quirky tidbit that sometimes gets overshadowed by the more dramatic philosophical aspects of Athens. Yet it was a vital part of their daily life and economy. As a goddess of strategic warfare, Athena's influence was also felt on the battlefield, but in a unique way. Unlike Ares, who embodied the brutal, chaotic side of war, Athena inspired calculated tactics, defensive formations, and diplomatic solutions when possible. Athenian military leaders sought her guidance for intelligent campaigns, emphasizing cunning and foresight over sheer aggression. You see the disciplined lines of their hoplites, the strategic movements of their navy, all designed with a mind towards optimal outcomes, not just bloodshed. This approach reflects Athena's own nature as a thoughtful warrior, not a reckless one. Her patronage even subtly influenced the burgeoning Athenian democracy. While it developed over centuries, the idea of reasoned debate, of citizens participating in decisions, of laws being based on logical principles rather than pure might, resonated with Athena's attributes. She represented order and justice, qualities that were foundational to their developing legal and political systems. You hear the murmurs of citizens gathering in assembly, their voices raised in discussion, seeking to shape their own destiny through collective reason. Historians still argue whether the democratic ideals of Athens were a direct product of their devotion to Athena or if the existing political climate simply found a fitting symbol in her attributes. Perhaps it was a synergistic relationship, where the goddess and the city shaped each other. The grand festivals and religious practices in Athens would revolve around Athena. The Panathenaic festival, held every 4 years, was a spectacular celebration in her honor, featuring athletic contests, musical performances, and a grand procession to the Acropolis to present a new peplos, a woven robe, to her ancient cult statue. You can almost hear the joyous shouts, the music, the rhythmic march of the procession, a vibrant display of civic and religious devotion. So, the divine vote that chose Athena over Poseidon wasn't just a moment in myth. It was a foundational charter for the city. It instilled in the Athenians a set of values: wisdom, reason, craftsmanship, strategic thinking, that became integral to their identity and contributed immensely to their lasting legacy. The olive tree, standing proudly on the Acropolis, became a living testament to this profound connection, a constant reminder of the goddess who had guided their path to greatness. And as you feel the quiet, permeating influence of Athena settling deeper into the spirit of Athens, your own consciousness drifts further towards the realm of deep, peaceful sleep. You're still gently suspended, aren't you? The quiet hum of Athenian values, shaped by Athena, resonates around you, a testament to the enduring influence of myth on a burgeoning civilization. You've seen how the olive tree was more than just a gift. It was a blueprint for a way of life. Now, as the story continues to unfold, we look beyond the initial establishment of Athens to consider the broader implications of this divine contest, and how it echoed through the entire ancient Greek world, shaping not just one city, but the very understanding of divine power and human destiny. The story of Athena and Poseidon's contest became a foundational myth for all Greeks, not just Athenians. It wasn't merely local folklore. It was a widely known tale that underscored key aspects of their worldview. It exemplified the concept of divine patronage, showing how gods actively intervened in the founding and shaping of human communities. This ubiquitous belief in divine intervention is a mainstream historical fact, influencing everything from daily prayers to grand military campaigns across all Greek city-states. You feel the deep reverence, the constant awareness of the unseen hands guiding human affairs.